The stars had always held secrets, and humanity believed they had time to uncover them. They thought invasions would be loud, spaceships tearing through the sky, lasers scorching the ground, defiant resistance by brave soldiers and scientists. But the invasion of Earth came silently, wrapped in the most delicate and dangerous of weapons: memory. No one knew the exact moment it began. There were no flashes of light or strange sounds from the sky. Instead, people began to forget. First, small things: birthdays, phone numbers, directions to a friend's house. But the forgetfulness wasn't random. It had purpose, precision. People forgot that there had ever been a world leader named Thomas Riley. History books edited themselves overnight. Children in school no longer learned about the Cold War or the moon landing. Events once carved into the very fabric of human identity vanished like footprints in sand, washed away by invisible tides. The world adapted as it always did. Humans didn't panic at first. They blamed stress, media overload, digital dependency. Governments set up memory wellness centers in every major city. People lined up by the thousands for tests and treatments, unaware that these very facilities were part of the invasion. Inside, the final threads of truth were clipped from their minds. The invaders had no name, not one that any human could remember. They were shapeless, formless things that existed beyond perception. Not seen but sensed. They slipped into minds like shadows into rooms, gentle and unnoticed. They didn't conquer with fire or steel. They took control of the story of reality. And once they rewrote the story, humanity followed the script without question. Daniel Rios was a librarian in Chicago. He'd always had a love for old books and stories that felt larger than life. But lately, something had been bothering him. Books were changing. He'd shelve a volume about World War II one day, and return the next to find it filled with blank pages or rewritten as a fictional account. Creative reinterpretation, the news called it. Historical adjustment for emotional clarity, the universities said. But Daniel remembered. Or rather, he almost remembered. He kept a small notebook in his pocket, something old and leather-bound that he never let go of. It was filled with scribbles, dates, and fragments of conversations. Apollo 11 moon landing 1969. One line read, Twin Towers, September 11, 2001. Another note, why does no one remember global warming? Every time something in the world shifted, Daniel would write down what he thought was real. But even that became harder. Sometimes he'd wake up and the words would be gone. Other times, his own handwriting would argue with itself. One rainy Thursday, he met a woman named Mira in the back corner of the library. She was staring at a map of the world, a real paper map, worn at the edges. "This doesn't look right," she said without turning around. "What do you mean?" Daniel asked. "Australia. Smaller, isn't it? I remember it being bigger. And where's Greenland?" Daniel felt a jolt, like his mind had been touched by electricity. "You remember Greenland?" "Of course I do," she said, lowering her voice. "It used to be up here." She pointed to a blank patch of sea. They stared at the map in silence, two strangers bonded by forgotten geography. "Who are you?" Daniel finally asked. "I used to be a linguist. Now, I suppose I'm just another glitch." That night, she showed him her journal. It was thicker than his, bound in red cloth. Inside were memories, detailed timelines, names of lost friends, books that no longer existed. She called them ghost facts, evidence that something was deeply wrong. Together, they began looking deeper. Newspaper archives, old videos, anything untouched by the digital stream. They discovered entire chunks of history missing. Mass protests, social movements, even natural disasters no one spoke of anymore. Earthquakes that had once killed thousands had been erased from memory and from the geological record. A volcano in South America had supposedly never existed. "We're being rewritten," Mira said one evening. "Not just our memories, our entire species. Like someone's editing a script, and we're the actors who don't realize the stage has changed." They weren't alone. A quiet resistance had begun to take shape. Scattered groups calling themselves the Remembers. They communicated in code, etched into trees, written in invisible ink, or whispered in bookstores. Their goal wasn't to fight, but to remember. They believed if enough people held on to the truth, reality itself could be restored. But the invaders were smart. They didn't just erase, they replaced. When a monument disappeared, a new one appeared in its place, with a different name and plaque. New holidays emerged overnight. Unity Day replaced Independence Day. New heroes filled textbooks. Children learned about the Great Peace Council of 1933, which had never happened, and no one questioned it, except the Remembers. One by one, members of the resistance began vanishing. Not taken, not killed, just gone, as if they'd never been. Others were rewritten. Daniel met a man named Ben who swore he used to be a professor of political history. Now he was a mailman and didn't know who the UN was. "You think you know yourself," Ben said, his voice hollow. "But when your memories are lies, what are you?" The world outside grew eerily calm. No wars, no protests, no angry voices. People went to work, watched curated news, attended holographic concerts, smiled at their screens. It was peace, but not by choice. It was as if the invaders had scrubbed away all conflict, all rebellion. Earth had become a perfectly clean slate for someone else's story. Daniel and Mira pressed on. They found a hidden room beneath the old public library, filled with books no one remembered writing. They called it the archive. Inside were pages that still told the truth. Memoirs of people who had been erased, accounts of events that had been undone. They read for days, barely sleeping. Each fact they reclaimed felt like breathing air again after being underwater. But then came the night when Mira forgot Daniel's name. They had been talking about the 1994 Rwandan genocide, which had been erased from modern memory, when Mira suddenly blinked. "I'm sorry," she said. "What did you say your name was?" Daniel froze. "Mira. It's me." She frowned. "We just met, didn't we?" Something had slipped, a crack in the defense. And once it started, it couldn't be stopped. She began forgetting more words, places, her own journal. Daniel tried everything, rereading the archive with her, showing her old photos, even playing recordings of their conversations. But nothing held. It was as if her soul was slowly being edited away. Then, one morning, she was gone. Daniel returned to the archive and found a new book on the shelf. It had her name on the spine. Inside were blank pages. The loss nearly broke him, but instead of surrendering, Daniel doubled his efforts. He copied pages from the archive, tucked them in envelopes, and mailed them to strangers across the globe. He sent books to small towns, stashed papers in train stations, read forgotten stories aloud on pirate radio frequencies. He knew he was being watched. People in suits who never blinked began following him. His apartment was searched. Once, he woke up to find every note he'd ever written rewritten in someone else's handwriting. Still, he persisted. One night, while broadcasting from a makeshift station under a burned-out cathedral, he said the words that would later become legend. "They took our weapons, our will, and now our minds. But they can't erase all of us. Not forever. If you hear this, write something. Anything. Say your name out loud. Tell someone about your favorite childhood memory. Hold on. Because truth is not just history. It is who we are." For months afterward, strange things began to happen. A child in Iceland drew a picture of a flag no one recognized, but it matched a flag from a forgotten nation. An old woman in Cairo woke up with a vivid memory of her daughter, who had been erased from all family photos. In Tokyo, a subway station filled with graffiti that read, "Remember who you are." The invaders noticed. The rewrite accelerated. One day, the sun rose in the north. Trees changed color overnight. People began to dream of creatures with long fingers and eyes like mirrors. The fabric of reality was fraying. But even then, Daniel kept going. The last recording of his voice ends with a whisper. If you're hearing this, you're part of the resistance. Keep remembering. No one knows what happened to him. Some say he became a shadow like the invaders, untouchable, untraceable. Others believe he wrote himself out of the story on purpose, leaving only the truth behind. Today, Earth is calm, peaceful, efficient. People go to work. They celebrate Unity Day. They don't ask questions. But sometimes, just sometimes, a child will say they remember a man who used to tell stories on the radio, a librarian who hid books under the city. And they remember, and that memory is the first weapon.